Everybody, this is Kyle Farrell from the Balanced Singer podcast and blog. I've been teaching some first lessons to new students recently, and several of them, of course, have asked questions about breath or whatnot. What I seem to consistently realize, I always ask people to teach me what you know, and then I can help fill in the gaps there. So when we play that, what I call "You Be the Teacher," what I almost always hear is that the students have thought a lot about the inhalation phase of breathing for singing, but they've not thought nearly as much about what should be happening or what might be happening or what the sensations might be as you're exhaling, which is, of course, when we're actually singing. So they talk a lot about the inhalation, big breath, deep breath, diaphragm, yada, yada, yada. Watch out for shoulder breathing, etc. All of which is, relatively accurate. But when I say, what about when you're actually on the exhale, when you're actually singing? And I usually get some version of a kind of blank stare. So I wanted to share what I always teach, at least in a very short, compact, simplified version of it, because to me, that's the foundation. And it's really a lot simpler than I think a lot of people think it is, or than a lot of resources make it seem like it is. It basically comes down to this, and I always use my hands to imitate my rib cage. When we're under normal circumstances, like sitting on the couch watching television, our rib cage expands when we breathe in, and it immediately collapses. Why? Because there's no reason for anything else to happen. That is a low impact situation. I don't need to suspend or expand or extend my breath in that situation, so it just collapses right away. When we sing, the expansion part of that is very similar. I breathe in, but now, instead of allowing that rib cage to just immediately collapse, I basically ride that feeling of expansion down, right? And what I use is a simple exercise that I just call the alphabet for reasons that will become obvious. Set a metronome to quarter note equals 60, and then I simply go A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, etc., etc. And to wherever, not to wherever we sort of completely peter out, but to wherever the quality tone ceases. And I'll have the student take a note of that. We'll do it 3 times, let's say, and we'll say, hey, you made it to M, and then N. So let's write that down in your notebook, and I want you to do that every day for the next couple of days, for the next week or 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever. And you can see that, oh, now I'm getting to P, now I'm getting to R, now I'm getting to T, whatever the case may be. I always point out that getting through the alphabet 73 times in one breath is not the goal. That's a ridiculously long phrase that's not really practical or applicable for any sort of real-world singing. But it can compare apples to apples, since you're using that metronome. It can compare apples to apples, today's results with another day's results. And if nothing else, it gives you a chance to practice. Now, what I would look for when you're doing that exercise, or teachers when you're teaching that exercise, is some tells. Is the student white knuckling it and going A, B, C, with all sorts of tension here and ostensibly here? Or are they finding a nice release, but a nice efficiency, right? What most singers, in my experience, do is they're what I call gushers. They would, if left to their own devices, they would go A, B, C, and just spend so much air that they would run out of air really, really quite quickly. Not quite as quickly as I just did to illustrate a point, but more quickly than they necessarily need to. So this idea of we sing on that feeling of expansion. There's a set of intercostal muscles that make the ribs go out when we inhale. There's another set that makes them go in when we exhale. And those two muscles leaning against each other and resisting one another is what has often been called the luta vocale, the vocal battle. And that sense of leaning is also what gives us the term appoggio. Appoggio comes from appoggiare, which means to lean, and that's where that term appoggio comes from. So if the term appoggio has seemed shrouded in Italian mystery to you, it's really very, very simple. It's simply the muscles that make your rib cage go out, leaning against the muscles that make your rib cage go in. And for my money, balancing those two forces is the central tenet of great singing, because without proper breath management, without proper energy management, the singing voice is never going to be as healthy and sustainable and efficient as it can be. Another thing I would say about this, I think one of the most important things that sets up the rib cage is the feet. And you might say, the feet, what the heck? When I stand with my weight in my heels, then all of this abdominal activity is a totally secondary thing that I have to will to come alive. If instead I'm about 60% on the balls of my feet, about 40% on my heels, then I feel my abdomen and these muscles of Appoggio come alive, right? And so I always talk about the feet being the ultimate foundation. I mean, obviously they're lowest, closest to the floor, but they are ultra important in singing, because if my feet are right, if the weight is in the balls of the feet more so than in the heels, not so much that we become imbalanced, but more so than in the heels, then all of this abdominal energy is just available and turned on. It's primary, it's not secondary. And that is super important in order to set the table for this excellent Appoggio management. If I can get the activity, the big muscles of the rib cage providing the energy and metering out the energy for my breath, then all of these muscles can be released. The rest of the vocal tract can be released. Remember, released, not relaxed. This is a whole podcast episode unto itself. But if I totally relaxed, as Phyllis Curtin used to say, I would slump and fall out of my chair. The goal is not relaxation. The opposite of tension is not relaxation. The opposite of tension is release. Let me say that again. The opposite of tension is not relaxation. The opposite of tension is release. For singing purposes, release is what we're after. How many times have you heard somebody say, relax your jaw? And then all of a sudden we have this hang dog, like how am I going to make a resonant tone if everything is so depressed like that because I've got a relaxed jaw? Whereas if I say release the jaw, then I can still have that inner smile sensation and all of the lift that helps set up the acoustics of my resonating tract. So remember, expansion. Breathe in and then ride that expansion down, just like a surfer riding the wave in. They're not creating the energy, they're harnessing the energy and taking advantage of that available energy from those big muscles. Okay, I hope that helps. Thanks.